When I first read Sam's bio, my 5-kilometre run that morning suddenly seemed a little less impressive. And I could only feel motivated after reading what Sam has done and achieved. Sam has a veterinary degree with a specialisation in large animal medicine. Sam is a technical support specialist for Diamond V. In that role, Sam provides technical assistance to Diamond V ruminant teams and plays a key role as part of the company's food safety initiatives. On top of this, Sam is made Colonel in the United States Air Force, and with that has been all over the world, including Iraq, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Today, Sam will provide an insight to the link between food security and national security and the impact humans have on beef production overall. Ladies and gentlemen, please provide a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Dr. Sam Barringer. Thanks, Sam.
What I do in the Air Force as a veterinarian, it's quite unique. So I'm in charge of a unit whose principal role is to take soldiers of any NATO country, if they're injured, put them on an airplane and bring them home. So the people that report to me are doctors, nurses, technicians, dentists, all these professionals that report up through me, and I kind of move the pieces around to make sure that happens. And it's a very interesting role. And then the other side of that is, and so that's sort of the helicopter with the Red Cross on it. And then the other role is this veterinary role. And you go, wow, that is a really odd mix. Doesn't it seem like an odd mix? Okay, how did those two match up? Unless you think about this concept of food security and national security, so whether I get off this slide or not is all dependent on whether I think you're tracking with me. Otherwise, I'll just keep saying the same thing over and over again. And so, first of all, thank you, Smartbeef, for this conference and what you're doing out here. It's so critical that we, as rural people, agricultural people, come together and have solidarity about what we're trying to do. And then second of all, being sponsored and my wife and I being carried all over Australia by the FeedWorks team, that's just been a blessing to us as well. So thank you for being here. And then I'll just ask you some questions or some things to think about. What are the odds that a country could invade Australia and conquer it? What do you think that number is? I would put it at near zero, if not impossible. Okay? It's almost impossible to think of a situation where someone could invade Australia and conquer it. Why? Think about how and why Australia is as stable as it is, and think about the wars of the last 50 years. In the last 50 years, has anybody really conquered another country? Not really. We've had lots of wars, we've had lots of conflicts, but when countries fall, there's a universal principle every time a country falls. And it is so critical because it's what we do. If they have food and they have food security, there is no outside force that could come into Australia and do anything but shed a lot of blood. They couldn't win. It's impossible for them to win. And we spend a lot of time thinking about all of the other things that make our countries great, and I'll include the US in that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have food security, if we don't do our jobs, as it relate in this case to the feedlot industry or whatever industry we're in, how quick does Australia or the US or any developed country devolve into chaos? How quick would that happen? Weeks? Months? Years? That's not what history shows, it's days. It's days. If you don't have food security, then your society will devolve very quickly. Think about those of you that have children. If you couldn't feed your children, what would you do? Would you resort to criminality? You bet I would. Absolutely we would. And so when we think about this idea of food and national security, there intricately linked more than any one single issue. If we're able to do our job well, so when I accepted this keynote address, the one thing that I said I was going to do in this was, one, motivate you folks to do even better with what you're already doing, and then make you recognize the importance of what you do. Because sometimes we just get up, we go out, we take care of cattle, we run the logistics chain, we do all of this work, and we don't really understand how important it is. A lot of the things that's happening around people making diet choices are the direct effect of our efficiency. And so we're often critical, well, they're eating that or they're eating that. If we didn't do our job well, they wouldn't have a choice. They absolutely would not have a choice. Go to a third world country where food security is not intact. What do people eat in those countries? Anything they can. And they're not that picky. So those upstart groups that are coming up are a function of how well we do our job. And sometimes we don't stop and pat ourselves on the back well enough. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's look into this and go into the next slide here. And I need to get this clicker. So some of the books, some of the things I'm going to tell you are contained in these books. These ideas are ones that I've stolen, and then some of them are my own ideas. How many of you have ever seen the TED Talk by Simon Sinek, Start With Why? Let me see your hands. Okay, a lot of people have. This is sort of a seminal book that I think that at least go to the TED Talk. And then The Storyteller's Secret is a sleeper book. And as I go through this process of this keynote today, I'll tell stories, not because I want you to pay attention to me, but because I want you to see the technique of how you can influence or get someone to think about an issue through the use of story. Okay, think about the best instructor you ever had, and think about the technique he or she used to make themselves a good instructor. If you're a good storyteller, you can move people to the right position. If I stood up here and gave you the next 45 minutes of graphs and data, what would be the uptake in an audience of this size? Near zero. Near zero. But if I tell a story to illustrate a point, it appeals to that section of our brain that has a higher retention. And then I'm going to spend a lot of time about teamsmanship. So this idea of national and food security, I've already done my key statement. The question is, how do we do better at food security, not based on animal? If I follow the veterinary side of me, I can bore you to death. If I follow the military side of me, there are two types of people that have been in combat. Those that tell stories and never have been, and those that have never been and tell stories, okay? And so I don't tell combat stories, but I can tell specific stories that appeal to what we're trying to do here. And so I always show this slide on core values. This is my son, Ben, graduating from the Air Force Academy. And this is my son, Dan. And then this guy who, it's so interesting to travel the world and hear people's opinion of that, but this is my youngest son in the Oval Office, and this is my oldest son as he's commissioning. So we're a group of military people, and over the years, you saw my deployment schedule, right, where I was gone an awful lot. So imagine being the mother of these boys while dad's in Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever I was, twice in each case. And then having to raise these boys who ended up, they're all boys, okay? There's nothing but testosterone running through our house, okay? Imagine being their mother, and so I get a lot of the accolades and I get this hero position, but my wife who's here, that's the real hero, folks. Going to war is one thing, but being home with those boys, that's kind of an important thing. But that being said, these core values that we live and that I taught the boys, and they've known for many, many years, are integrity first. That's kind of an important core value, isn't it? Integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. Those are our core values. We try to live, eat, breathe them. And I have my military challenge coin that I have that on, and I don't know if you know what a military challenge coin is, but I'll explain them after if we have time. So if I'm asking questions and I have a very receptive audience and somebody jumps up and says it's this, I have a few of these out here and I'll toss them back to you. They're heavy. I would advise catching them because they will hurt if you don't. And I don't know how far my mic grows, but if you answer, then I have a few of these I'm going to give out. They're called commander's coins that you might find interesting as we go into this. So that's core values: integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. It's really how we have to do life, certainly in the feedlot cattle industry. So using behavioral science, I'm not going to talk about cattle behavior. I'm going to talk about these ideas: conceptualization versus non-conceptualization. And you go, man, that seems like a big word. Know your why, teamsmanship, leadership, mentorship, followership, and then this, at the last, just before I came down here, they asked me to put a little blurb in on the fourth industrial revolution. How many of you have heard the term, the fourth industrial revolution? Let me see your hands. So a few of us are tracking along this line, but it's really where we're going. Okay, so let's dive into this. Conceptualization. Conceptualization is the ability to take multiple ambiguous inputs and develop a cohesive strategy out of it. What percentage of the population do you think possess that trait? Anyone want to guess a number? Somebody throw a number out, loud and clear. How much? 1. You know, so that's not too far off. It's about 3%. So when you do a study across population sectors, it's about 3%. If you went into agriculture now and looked at the people that are in agriculture, what do you think happens to that number? It is rare to find someone in agriculture that is not a conceptualizer. So in fact, if you have this skill set, you're going to hate going into a job that's in a box. You can't stand it. You want to have this ability to have all this ambiguity come at you and figure it out. And it's such a neat trait. And so when I interface with conceptualizers in agriculture, it's inherent. I can't teach it. I can put you in situations that improve it. But guess what? If you are a non-conceptualizer, how do you do life? You like things within a very defined set of parameters. You don't like left or right. And in fact, they get really frustrated if you bounce around. So when you put a team together, you have to have both conceptualizers and non-conceptualizers, because the non-conceptualizer actually gets shit done, right? The conceptualizer comes up with an idea a minute, but somebody has to bring it across the finish line, okay? So both sides are needed, but guess what happens with conceptualizers and non-conceptualizers when they're in close proximity to each other? They don't like each other. And they get frustrated by each other. But we need both sides. In agriculture, we're just covered with these type of people. This story was in Thailand, and I was asked to come in. We were doing an amphibious landing in Thailand, and the guy that wanted to come in on his land used elephants for logging. Any of you seen elephants used for logging or been around that? And so he said, you can use my land, but I'm having some health problems with my elephants. They're getting a particular parasite, and we're having a hard time deworming them. So it's a very simple veterinary trait. So the U.S. Army comes and says, we need a veterinarian with expertise in elephants. So they don't have a lot of those people, I bet. I didn't happen to be one of them, but when they threw it out, I said, yeah, I'll do it. I mean, I'm up for anything. I can figure this out. I'm a farm kid, came from that background, I'll figure it out. So we go there and we use a typical drench dewormer. So you're standing in front of the elephant and you have a cattle drench dewormer and you start squeezing, okay, because they're heavy. After about 8 or 9 squeezes, the elephant says, I've pretty much had enough. If an elephant decides he's had enough, there is not a crush large enough or anybody stupid enough to stand there and try to keep squeezing that trigger. You need to move. So that's not going to work. So then I said, well, what about a poron? Okay, So they pulled it up to this platform, and I get a pour-on out, and I poured the pour-on right between the shoulder blades. What's going to happen to alcohol-based pour-ons in the center of an elephant's back? If you know the answer to that, I'm worried about you. It just sits there. It doesn't absorb. I said, so that's not going to work. And I was watching this guy who was poking him along with a sharp stick, steering him. I go, I bet you he'll let me get up on his back and give it an injection with no issues whatsoever. So I took a dose syringe, 14 gauge, 2-inch needle, jumped up there with a lot of injectable dewormer. First lesson, if it's 95 degrees Fahrenheit with a lot of humidity and you sit in a puddle of alcohol, there are some memories that won't be lost very soon. But the elephant clearly tolerated this. Now, I suspect somebody else had thought of that and didn't pass it on to me, but I had to figure it out on my own. And I would guarantee, almost guarantee, everybody in this room, because you're conceptualizers, would have figured this out, okay? That's how our minds work. We solve problems without necessarily a textbook solution. And because of how much we enjoy that, we tend to stay in the cattle business, because there's not a lot of opportunities to do that outside of agriculture and the cattle business. So we're conceptualizers, but why do we do this? When we think of Simon Sinek, why? Everything has to start at the core. Why do we do it? If we know our why, how we do things and what we do are really driven. And so if you leave this conference with nothing else, be able to communicate your why. Why am I feeding cattle? Why am I doing this? And then make it holistic within your whole life, because if you know your why, then how you do things and what you do makes sense. If you don't know your why, you're just kind of out there flailing. Back to this veterinarian military thing, I understand that food security and national security are linked, so I'm going to do everything I can, how or what. I'm here in Dalby, Australia, because what I do is directly linked to my why. Food security means my boys don't have to go to war. Food security means Australia is safe. Why we do what we do has to drive what and how we do it. And if you know that why, how you do it every day results in excellence. Because we can't afford mediocrity anymore. Maybe we could 50 years ago. I don't know. I wasn't alive. Well, I was alive, but wasn't thinking very good then. So think about that. And so start with why. The backfire effect. Some of you may not agree with a darn thing I'm saying up here, and that doesn't surprise me. The backfire effect is a cognitive quirk that we all have, okay? Facts and data that we share that contradict our core beliefs, as we have that discussion, it backfires. So instead of convincing someone on our point, we have this back and forth. So if we have this core discussion with somebody who does not believe in meat, and we drop facts and data, and we have this back and forth, what happens in almost every one of those engagements? Every single one to a person that I've ever seen. Those people that differ from us, it actually backfires, and they're more firmly entrenched than before the argument started. We can't engage or allow the backfire effect to derail us. Okay, so how do we get around this? I'll give you an example. Parents that are reluctant to use vaccines because they believe vaccines will harm their children. Do you have that in Australia at all? Is there any of that sort of discussion here? So it's a big deal in the US. So we sit them down in a room. We gave a 2-day seminar with all of the data and information that said vaccine is 100% safe. This is a non-issue. And what do you think happened after they saw the data? More parents did not want to have their kids vaccinated. Data drove them, it backfired on them. Yet that's the technique and the tactic we use. So they reconvened the seminar, and they brought the same parents in, and they gave a 2-day seminar. At the end of that 2-day seminar, 50% of the people in that room had changed positions. What did they do different in the second seminar? What'd they do different? So important to us in the beef industry because we often miss this. What did they do different? They told stories. They told real-life accounts of things that had happened that appealed to hear, the heart, rather than hear. And we kind of lose that idea. We forget to tell good stories. And so how do we do it? Our reasoning brain is less scientific than you think. It's easier to say that fact is wrong than my view is wrong. Okay? Avoid overkill. If one fact is good enough, but at the end of the day, the best persuasive device at our disposal is the ability to tell a good story. When was the last time you took a course on how to tell a good story? I'm not talking about BS. I'm actually talking about a real life story that you could share with someone that would move them to a different position. Paradigm shifts are really tough to do because we've been programmed to just kind of hit them with data. You know, beef doesn't impact cholesterol. This doesn't do this. This doesn't do that. We get caught up in this data piece rather than stories, and we can't get through this paradigm shift. So as you look at that rather funny slide, 4 out of every 3 people struggle with math. That's probably true, right? And you look at that Roman numeral equation up there. That's Roman numerals. For those of you that want to make it algebra, it's not algebra. It's straight Roman numerals. Is there anything that I could do to that equation to make it true? Because there is no way x, which is 10, is equal to 11 plus 1, right? Is there anything I can do to that equation to make it true? This is worth a coin if somebody gets this. Switch it, or who said that? Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Pop it around. Which forces you to change your viewpoint. It forces you to change your perspective. We have to change our perspective on this, or we're going to get stuck still spinning our wheels. And we have to look at teamsmanship. Teamsmanship is never, and I repeat, never incorrect. Leadership is frequently incorrect. Yet what do we teach our children and everybody around us from the time they're this big? What do you want to inculcate in them? We always talk about leadership, leadership, leadership. As a warfighter, leadership is very dangerous. Leadership will get you killed. Teamsmanship will keep you alive. And so here's sort of the example that I always use. Anybody work with draft horses out here very often? Let me see your hands. So the guys, yeah, you ain't getting another coin, so forget it. How much can a draft horse pull? Pounds. Sorry, I'm going to really challenge your math here. Average draft horse. U.S. draft horses can pull about 8,000 pounds, but they may have to pull in an opposite direction down here. So about 8,000 pounds. Now we're going to take 2 draft horses, we're going to tie them together, and they're untrained. Okay? How much can 2 untrained draft horses pull when they're yoked together? They're not trained. Give me a number. As much as 16,000, but frequently less than each one could pull on their own. Why is that? They're not trained and they're actually pulling against each other. Okay, anybody ever been on a team where you're actually less than what the 2 of you could get done on your own? Yeah. Some of you are looking at, yeah. Do I get a coin if I dime this guy out? You know? So now let's think about this. Okay, this is real math. This has been worked out. How much if they're trained to pull as a team? What's the number? Okay, you're pretty close. I'm going to give you a coin just for trying. Okay, if I hit you in the head, you know, you'd be like the Giants. I saw that rugby match. Those guys couldn't catch anything. As much as 32,000 pounds. How does that happen? How can it possibly get that type of synergy? Because that's what happens with teamsmanship. So if you think about what happens with the horse, as the horse is striding around, they have that moment of suspension, right? If you follow a horse, if you're trained as a team, when that horse is in that moment of suspension, what does his teammate do? It maintains the momentum by feeling that moment of suspension and picks up that slack. If I can train a horse to do that, horse isn't the dumbest animal in the world, a sheep is, okay? And I can tell that joke because I'm not in New Zealand. If I can train a horse to do that, can't we train people to think in those terms? And I would tell you that's what SEAL team training, that's what Delta Force training, that's what special operations training does, is sense that break in stride and pick it up, okay? And in the cattle industry, we have to be good enough in every aspect of what we're doing to feel that break in stride. Doesn't matter if it's a treatment crew, somebody pulling, whatever your role in this. Anybody here just work by themselves and never see another human being? We're all in some sort of teamsmanship that we've got to practice and think about. Be able to do it and tell these stories. And I don't have time to tell this. I'm going to tell it anyway. So I'm late. Just cut me off when I get to the end, Damien. So narratives are stories that offer both understanding and mystery. We have to be able to wrap ourselves around the story. This was a picture that was taken in Baghdad in 2003. And when we arrived in Baghdad, the Hussein brothers kept a pride of lions just outside of the green zone at their castle. And there's between 15 and 20 of them, I lost track. And they used these cats for rather nefarious purposes. So the way they were using these cats was not something that I'll share in this audience, but it was a bad deal. But cats breed quite nicely in captivity. So what do I do with these cats? So if you guys want to sit up with my wife, she's really feeling like she's off all by herself. So she just got over the smallpox. So and so we needed to do something. So if you're a veterinarian and you have carnivores that are accustomed to eating people, what would you do with them? Yeah, you're looking at the guy, was the guy that won't be my team member, I'll feed him that, you know. So we killed two birds with one stone. So as a veterinarian, the idea was, well, we need to euthanize these. Well, the Iraqis weren't going to have anything to do with that. They said, no, we would like you to figure out what to do with them and put them in the zoo. And so this is one of the cubs that, as a veterinarian, and I got involved with this, we spayed and neutered all of these cats and put them in the Baghdad Zoo, where they are living today quite nicely. One of the things that we did is we castrated an adult male lion that was he probably went about 850. So think about the challenges of castrating an 850-pound lion. And although it went well, okay, I guess, one of the things, back to this conceptualization piece, when I deployed to Iraq, I neglected to bring the tools and materials that I needed to castrate an adult lion. Just slipped my mind. What was I thinking? Okay, and so telling that story, just when you look out and you tell a story like that, and you have 300 and some odd people here, anybody here not listening? You know, when you tell an engaging story and you relate it back to a principle, then you can draw people in, right? So you just saw me demonstrate that technique. Again, if I had showed a data set, what's my percentage of uptake in an audience? 10%, 15%? Okay. It's not about me, it's about the idea. I needed to grab the idea. Whether you remember me, most of you will never see me again. Many of you will be grateful for that, okay? And that's okay. But the idea, you need to grasp this idea and you need to embrace it. Paradigm shift. If you're in a key leadership or managership role, you need to recognize that the people that report up to you or work with you, and you're a team member, that you're both a bottom-up servant as well as somebody that they need to look up to. You know, people want someone of integrity and character that they look up to. If they have that, they'll go to war for you. If they don't have that, they're not going to do it. They're going to go, oh, yeah, I'll do what the old man says, or whoever, but they're not going to have the same attitude. One of the ways that you can earn respect as a leader, so this is my military side coming up, is something called emergent intelligence, and it's never taught, it's not taught in any leadership course. And so here's the analogy. Any of you ever walked along a fence line and saw an anthill and just kicked it over? Let me see your hands of people that have done that. and the rest of you are liars, okay? We've all done it, right? So we kick the anthill over. What do the ants do every single time? They just go all over the place. Now, we don't stick around and watch, but a couple hours later, what happens to the anthill? They've rebuilt it. Who told the ants to rebuild it? Nobody, nothing. They have no hierarchical structure. And when they study that, there are people that study anthills, have way too much time on their hands. They look at all of the pathways and go, they rebuilt it better than it was before. The people at the ground level understand that we have inefficiencies. So what I often do as a military commander is I kick an anthill over that I absolutely know is inefficient. And then I sit back and let the people responsible for it rebuild it, and they own the rebuild. And guess what? Even if it isn't perfect, because they rebuilt it and they own it, by gosh, it worked better than it did before you kicked it over. So if you're willing to do that, and you got to do it very carefully, boy, when they go, hey, the boss trusts us, think about that technique in each individual personal situation. Building team resiliency. Just to be clear, this is a moulage. This is not a real patient. Okay, this is somebody who's been put makeup on. I would never take a picture of a soldier that had that injury, by the way. That's just messed up, right? So this guy has been made to look like he's hurt. Why would you do that? I'm training medics to go to war. And I would tell you, I meant to say this in the first slide. So when you go to Iraq or Afghanistan, guess which other country was in Iraq other than the US? There might have been some Australians there. And I got to tell you, of all the guys that I went to war with and everything that happened out there, guess what my favorite bunch of guys were to hang out with? Without fail, not a close second. Not only because they could get beer. Man, my Australian warfighters, man, I got a real soft spot right here for those guys. You guys, as a nation, need to be really, really proud of those men. I didn't know any of the ladies based on where I was at, but I'm sure the ladies are the same. But boy, those Australian special operator guys are near and dear to my heart. And so what you do is you simulate what's happening and you build muscle memory, okay? That builds team resiliency, and when something bad happens, you've practiced it, right? You've thought about it, you've drilled it. What does that mean? What does it look like in each one of your operations? I don't know what it does, but I can tell you if you want to build team resiliency, you got to practice. You can't just show up and say, I hope this shit works, because it won't. They'll face plan, okay? Got it? Normalization of deviance. Every one of you have this going on every single one of your operations today, where you have had time pressures and the people that work for you or you yourself have done this, and you've cut a corner. Anybody done that? You've got time pressure, you cut a corner. Nothing bad happens, so then what happens? You do it again, and then time pressure happens, and you cut another corner, and before you know it, you have a deeply abnormal activity going on. And the next thing you know, you have this normalization of deviance, this bad behavior that's going on that you're not even aware that it's going on. Every feed yard, every dairy, every operation I go on to, normalization of deviance is happening. We're standing up at the beep because it became okay. And we don't even know why we're standing up anymore. The beef industry, where we're at today, we have to identify that false beep, and we have to remove it from our system. The give is out of the system. We have to figure out what to do. So how do you do it? You got to utilize core values and principles. Back to my coins. Integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. We have to have passion about what we're doing. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, then everybody in your sphere of influence also loses passion for it. You've got to have passion for this industry, and you've got to have a lot of gas in the tank. Gas is a military acronym. It may or may not translate in Australia. Gas is give a shit. You've got to have a lot of gas in your tank. If you've run out of gas, figure out how to fill your tank back up. Whatever that looks like, figure out how to fill it. We can't get to where we need to go if we don't have passion about what we're doing. And then lastly, tell your story, but live a story worth telling, okay? That's my advice. It's what I always told my boys. Whatever it is you're doing, figure out how to live a story worth telling. That rarely means that I watch television and bitch about politicians. That's also fun, but you can run out of gas on that one. Here's what I like to tell people. Anybody ever heard of the 5-hour rule? This is a Warren Buffett thing. Spend at least 5 hours a week in something outside of your realm of expertise, acquiring diverse, rare, and valuable information from people, information, and experiences. Stretch yourself and think about something other than cattle, and begin to think of things, because you'll come up with ideas that if you stay in your little box, you wouldn't have had. You got to stretch yourself. You got to read, and you got to look at other things other than, geez, what are the cows doing today? Okay? Fourth Industrial Revolution. I'm going to end on this because I'm running out of time. Okay? This is a key defining principle, is a fusion of mechanical, digital, and biological worlds into a massive increase in artificial intelligence. I was in Switzerland. I spoke at a conference, and the guy who was an engineer spoke, and his principal topic was all of the automation that was coming to the food sector. His idea was not feedlots versus dairy versus processors, whatever. His concept of what the food producing system was started at the individual producer's level. He didn't think of, well, you guys do this, you guys do this. This engineer had everything thought, and he went through all of the advances that are coming at us. And I'm sitting there, and my jaw's dropped. And if you don't think that automation is coming at a speed that you could never before imagined, then you're missing the signals. In 1903, the Wright brothers decided to go on an airplane. 120 years ago, I don't know what the math really is, it's a while ago, okay? 100 years pass, anybody blink at the idea of getting in an airplane? We don't. This technology is coming at us fast. This automation is coming at us fast. Robotics and AI will progress at a rate that will allow most, and this guy said most manual tasks to be accomplished efficiently and economically through robotics. In food producing, he was specifically talking about animal agriculture. Humans then are afforded the time to focus on tasks that involve judgment and creativity, okay? Predictions. These are my predictions based on my level of information. Robotics and AI will remove most human manual functions in dairies and feedlots. It's coming. How quick is not, I can't predict that, but it's coming fast. Maintenance of robots will become more important than your nutritionist and your veterinarian. Most important person on your operation will be the guy who keeps the robot working. Now, as a veterinarian, I vehemently disagree with that point, but it won't matter, okay? It won't matter. Fixed costs, asset costs will demand a high degree of both physical security and cybersecurity. It's coming, okay? The sheer volume of data will require cybersecurity emphasis and intensive human judgment. Who is really important in this slide? I took this picture yesterday, and right out here, thank you to the company that allowed me to take it. Who's the most important person in that slide? Because there is a veterinarian there, and he ain't that important. The most important person in that slide is that guy right there. He's going to make that machine work, because the math will tell you, again, paradigm shift, that machine right there is better than any human being in this room at reading a book. Period. End of discussion. Argue with it or not. It's where we're at. Okay? Technologies that involve removal of human cattle handling will be a priority. Abandonment of serious curtailment of injections of antibiotics, vaccines, and repro hormones will occur. Alternative solutions of getting these health interventions have to be figured out. And lastly, our food supply will be digitized down to the individual animal. You will know at the steak level that entire animal's history. That is absolutely going to happen, and that'll happen faster than you think. Some countries already can do it. Okay, so keep that in mind. These are the things that are coming at us. Summary, start with why. Got to have passion for this industry because it's changing fast. And we got to have resiliency around that. Got to have a lot of gas. Know your why. I would tell you food security and national security is enough reason for me to get up in the morning and to do the best I can possibly do. Be intentional to create unforgettable moments with either your family, your friends, or the people that you work for, and live a story worth telling. This was taken in Afghanistan. I don't have time to tell the story other than to say, because we returned an element of food security to this region along Kunar province, any one of you could walk into that province today and be perfectly safe. Take you 5 miles north of where this operation occurred and they'll shoot you. That simple. Seeing this in hand. In summary, what is necessary to be resilient to rapid change? Teamsmanship, innovation, utilize emergent intelligence. Do you remember what that was? Okay. And then recognize that this gift that we've been given, this conceptualization gift, is a unique gift. And there's a whole bunch of people that aren't wired like us. They don't get us. In the U.S., they all vote Democrat. See, I can say that here, right? Australian national security is 100% dependent on you doing a good job to maintain food security. There is no nation on the face of the earth that can come in and take over Australia. It is not possible. The math says no way. But what if everybody got hungry tomorrow? What happens to Australia? It will not be Australia very long. The difference between what you do and what I do is what Australia is all about, just the same as it is the US of A or any other country. If people eat, they will go on about their business and want to be left alone. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sam. We actually have a bit of time for a few questions, Sam, if that's all right, mate. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and one of the Courtneys will provide a microphone. I think some great take-home messages from me there was, know your why as a group in here. And I think the big part for us is, tell our story. We're passionate about what we do, but how we portray it. And the big one is, we're in this as a team to tell that story. So if any questions, please raise your hand now.
We got it on? Okay, yeah. Sam, thank you, that was a great talk. Can you just explain to me in the military at the moment how you manage the communication between dealing with ever increasing technology and the smarts around that and training kids to operate that technology that may not have finished high school?
Yeah, it's a great question. So how do we take this massive technological increase and then we get that down to the least common denominator? So there's a couple things that have to happen in the US, and I doubt Australia is much different. The first piece is we go through this first thing, so boot camp or basic training, in which we absolutely tear that kid down and replace whatever he was raised at and give him a new set of core values. And under that core values, he all of a sudden recognizes that for him to run or fix an F-22, he has to study his backside off, and they're motivated to do so. So we have to tear that individual down through boot camp and then build them back up to this new standard. That isn't for everyone. In America, it's 3% of our kids now. There's not a lot of kids that want to do it. So that's the first piece. And then the other side that is so unique, at my age, when new technology comes out, that robot sitting out there, I'm deeply intrigued by it. I have no freaking idea how to make it work. I can take an 18-year-old kid out there, and 10 minutes later, he can tell me everything there is to know about that kid, because they're being raised in a generation where that's not foreign to them, and it becomes somewhat intuitive to them. And it's a little bit scary, but my sons have all had children now, so my wife has become a grandmother, okay? I haven't dealt with that issue yet, so I'm not claiming that position. And so you give one of the grandbabies a smartphone, and at 2 years old, he's moving around in it. And I mean, honestly, to this day, my wife will ask me, well, how do you do that? I don't know, I don't care. Can I answer the phone? And so they're being raised intuitively to grasp this technology. And so while the speed with which it's occurring is way faster than even they can assimilate, the question then becomes, as we transition to manual labor being replaced, are we doing a good enough job for those folks to even prepare them for a labor force where, honestly, we don't need someone to, as an example, put cups on a cow to milk them. Don't need it anymore. Already been replaced by a robot. Okay, so it's going to be this transition, and there's going to be some pain. There's going to be some real pain, and this technological revolution is on us, and we better start thinking about it now. So I don't know if that answered your question, but okay, all right.
Thank you. We've got one more question we've got time for? Anyone? I might try one, Sam. That's
okay,
all right,
go ahead.
mate.
Yeah.
Mate, you spoke about before, I think it was in Afghanistan, you went in and you returned food security
Yes.
to that area.
Yes.
So you kind of, my take from that is you're using food to bring people together.
Yes.
In probably Western society, food and sometimes animal production is used a bit of a platform and to separate people.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd get you to provide comment on that and how we maybe tell our story.
So I think that's a really good point. And so one of the stories that I tell, and that was one of the last photographs. So we went into Kunar province where they had been very pro-Taliban, very anti-American, and because of all of the conflict there, their agriculture had been wiped out. There was nothing there. There were no goats, sheep, cows were gone, no horses. And so because of something they did for us, the return favor is I spent a little over 3 months bringing goats and sheep in there. You can't make this stuff up, right? So we decided to bring in 3,000 goats into this region. I mean, there were people bringing in goats in the back of taxi cabs. And I had a big wad of money, and I'll buy your goat, and we gave them to these people, and those kids were hungry. And so as we returned a degree of sustainment back to those people, then they were very grateful and continue to be grateful. In our situation, where we have plenty, what we do empowers people to go, I don't like what you're doing. And we've empowered them to do that. It's our fault that they have the capacity to do that because nobody's hungry. Nobody's hungry. And sometimes the response is to be critical of those people. I'm not critical of those people. They're in that position because of what I was so capable of doing, and that is for the rest of the masses, it is inexpensive, high-quality food, and then that allows them to pick another source of diet. I mean, isn't life about choice? I mean, isn't that what liberty is? I'm not critical of those people, and when we tell our story differently from that angle, we take away that friction. Say, no, I'm with you. Yeah, go for it. You're there because I did this. Embrace it, but don't engage in hot debate or criticize because, I go to war, and when I went to war and I fought what I did, I don't much care for Democrats, but I still fought for them, So, we have freedom so people can make those choices. And I think as we tell our stories, we talk about the great job we do in animal husbandry and welfare, and we do the best we can for this population that wants this dietary choice. But I'm not critical if you want to be, just eat vegetables. I couldn't do it personally. Good for you, but it's not on my to-do list. So I'm not critical of those people. So I don't know if that helps or makes any sense.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Sam. That was a truly inspiring presentation.
Yeah.
And we'll no doubt ask questions later. Thanks very much, Sam.
Yeah.